While $10,000 is the first milestone you should shoot for in your financial journey, I really think at $20,000, that's when your life really starts to change even more. This milestone is more about the acceleration of wealth, and you also benefit from the freedom to choose between staying at a toxic job or finding something better, becoming part of the investor class, and more. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I will share some actionable tips on how to save your first $20,000 if you aren't there quite yet. The first reason why 20K changes your life so much is that your wealth starts to accelerate at this mark. At the $10,000 level, you start to get a taste of compound interest, so earning an 8% return in the market meant that you were generating $800 per year. That's the equivalent of $66 per month, which can cover a utility bill or perhaps your monthly coffee habit. But at $20,000 with the same 8% return, we are now looking at $1,600 per year. And the really neat thing here is that your money is now making you more money without you having to work harder or save more. At $1,600 per year, that's more than $130 per month, which can really make a difference to your monthly budget. This also means that you are going to be compounding your wealth much faster. So when it came to making your first $20,000, if you were able to save and invest $500 a month from scratch at an 8% return, you would achieve $20,000 in about 35 months or 2 years and 11 months. And if you can save $1,000 per month through a combination of your regular income and maybe a side hustle or two, then you're only looking at 18 months to reach that milestone of $20,000. The beauty is that as your income grows, whether through raises, job changes, or additional income methods, you can accelerate this timeline even further. But let's take the first scenario, the $500 a month from scratch. It would take you 35 months, yes, for the first 20K, but the second 20K only takes about 26 months. And that's just simply because your original 20K is also generating you returns and you're still continuing with your contributions. Now, fast forward to when your portfolio size might be $500,000. There's just not even a comparison anymore. You are now generating $20,000 every 6 months at an 8% return. And when you have $1 million portfolio, you can generate 20K in just 90 days. That's simply just 1/4 of a year. So that's really the power of compound interest, and really one of the best perks of hitting $20,000 in your balance is basically benefiting from that. Another perk at the $20,000 level is much more psychological, and this is where you can have a huge shift in your mindset. Instead of thinking, oh, I'm really bad with money and I'm really struggling, your mindset at 20K is more, well, I have a good amount of reserves, and even if I run into an emergency, I'm still over the 5-figure mark. Before, if you only had $10,000 in your bank and you hit a setback, well, you would go backwards into the 4-figure territory, and I think that's a little bit more difficult mentally. So having 20K can be really liberating and confidence boosting. Considering that the median savings account of an American is around $8,000, you are doing 2.5 times better than the median. Previously, you might have been in survival mode when you were at the $10,000 or under level, and now you can start to shift your mindset to more of an abundance mindset at the 20K level because each dollar is making you more independent than before. One of my favorite authors, Morgan Housel, was actually talking about this exact principle on the most recent Diary of a CEO podcast, which I was on, by the way, but let's listen in to what he had to say.
Independence exists on a spectrum, and literally every dollar that you save is a little bit more independent than you were before. If you have $100 in the bank in savings, that can make it so that if you were to lose your job, you have a little bit more flexibility for rent or groceries or whatever it might be that you didn't before. If $1,000, $10,000, any amount that you have is a little bit more independent than you were before.
So having more money, according to him, will give you more flexibility and independence. And I think that around $20,000 is when you are starting to optimize for this and your identity really changes around money. If you identify that you are good with money, you in turn will make these decisions that reflect that identity, and therefore it becomes more of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The next reason why I think $20,000 is such a game-changing number is that it kind of allows you to have this freedom when it comes to career options. This is one of the most underrated benefits, I think. So when you don't have any money saved, I think you're always going to be operating from a position of, I need this job that I'm currently at, or else I might not be able to survive the next month. So at this level in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're actually moving on from the bottom of the pyramid. These are the physiological needs of food, water, shelter, and rest. And you're moving towards the safety step and beyond the basic needs level. Hypothetically speaking, if you were to work at a toxic job, perhaps it's physically laborious or perhaps it's mentally taking a toll on you, they do say that you shouldn't quit without another job lined up. However, I think if it gets to a point where it's so bad that you need to quit your job, at least with $20,000, you have enough of a runway that it will give you some breathing room, even if you quit your job without another one lined up. If you're able to live on $2,000 to $3,000 a month, that could be anywhere from 6 to 10 months of runway to find a really great opportunity. Compare that to the $10,000 level. Sure, that gives you some time, but it might not be enough time to find a better opportunity, and you might be forced into the same situation you were before, which is that you need a job to survive. I also believe that $20,000 gives you enough time to completely pivot your career or even start a business if that's something you've been thinking about. If you've been wanting to switch industries, go back to school and get a certification, or launch a new side hustle without savings, I think that's a really tough thing to do if you only had $10,000. So $20,000 in this case gives you a few more options, and I think that that freedom is worth it, because you could parlay that into a better job that pays you more of an income, and therefore your net worth can grow even faster at this point too. Now, speaking of other options that 20K gives you, I think one thing that's often not talked about is that when you're poor, everything costs more as a percentage basis, and $20,000 lets you kind of break free from that. Take banking, for example. Service fees and overdraft fees can eat into your net worth when you are struggling to get by. And a $35 overdraft fee when you are living paycheck to paycheck is just another obstacle that you have to think about. This can make you really feel like the deck is stacked against you, because you now have to take into consideration an extra variable in your everyday life that adds stress, whereas someone with $20,000 in their account might not even think about this issue. In 2022, banks made $9.9 billion off of overdraft fees alone, and with some customers, they even got hit over 30 plus times. Now, while that fee number is down from pre-pandemic levels of $15.5 billion, I feel like it's still way too much in my opinion. There are also service fees, like at a big bank like Chase. It could be $12 a month just to have your account open, unless you have a balance larger than $5,000 or $1,500. You'll be hit with a service fee. Now, banking fees are just one example of this kind of idea. There are other hidden costs of being poor, which include not being able to buy things in bulk because perhaps you don't have enough money to go to Costco and buy all these things in bulk. And buying things in bulk can actually save you 20 to 30% on your groceries. You might also have to buy cheap shoes or clothes that fall apart in months rather than investing in quality items. Or perhaps you have to pay home or car insurance bills monthly instead of annually, which might not be able to qualify you for, let's say, an annual discount. So if we were putting this in gaming terms, which I love doing that, I like using gaming analogies, I would say that this is a really good defensive perk of having 20K in your account. But I think that 20K will also give you some offensive abilities as well. And one primary one is that now you are in squarely what I like to call the investor class. The investor class is my next reason for why 20K is so important. And that's where your options for building wealth go beyond just saving. At 20K, you can start to max out your Roth IRA. So the 2025 limit is $7,000 per year. And if you allocate the full 7K to it, you still have $13,000 after that. Imagine you were trying to do that with just $10,000. You'd have to put up 70% of your $10,000 balance to do that, which means that you might have to sacrifice some financial security and perhaps your emergency fund in order to do that. It's at this level you can also start to build a properly diversified portfolio, whereas before you might have just gotten started with investing with one or two holdings. Now you could explore different types of investment options like REITs, bonds, other specific types of ETFs, and you have more skin in the game. Not to mention, there are sometimes index funds that have minimum investments of $3,000 required, and those usually come at brokerages like Vanguard. So I think having more money to invest is always a good thing. It's just gonna give you way more options. So visually speaking, I think a $20,000 breakdown could look like the following. Once you hit that mark, perhaps you have $7,000 in your Roth IRA invested in index funds and ETFs. You have $8,000 in an emergency fund. You have $2,000 in checking or spending money. And then perhaps you have $3,000 in taxable brokerage accounts, so individual stocks or other ETFs as well. Another benefit of being now a true investor, in my opinion, is that you should be able to ride dips out a little bit more. When you have a solid fundamental emergency fund and foundation of personal finance, you now understand that you're in this investing thing for a really long period of time. Even if you do see a 15 or 20% dip in the market, first, you won't be panicked. And second, you might actually have some extra capital to buy the dip and average into the market even more. I have so many friends who, when they got started with investing with $1,000, they invested all of it into the market, so the full $1,000. And I remember in my early 20s, a couple of my friends experiencing some volatility in the market, seeing their accounts go down by $150 and just ended up selling everything. So when you have $20,000, maybe you can set aside $1,000, $2,000, maybe $3,000 and just not even touch it at all. That's the whole goal with long-term investing, and I think it really benefits you that way. The next reason why I think $20,000 is so powerful is that it now gives you the ability to think more long-term instead of thinking short-term. If you're able to practice delayed gratification, you will usually benefit more financially in the long term. There was a famous Stanford psychology experiment called the marshmallow test that illustrated the brilliance of delayed gratification. So in the 1970s, they had children put into a very unique situation. They were all put into a room and they were offered a choice between one marshmallow immediately, or they got to wait 15 minutes to get 2 marshmallows instead. The experimenter would leave the room and come back in 15 minutes to see what these kids chose. Many of the children immediately went with the 1 marshmallow option. I mean, they wanted it really quickly, they wanted instant gratification. But the ones with the highest amount of self-control were able to resist their temptations and earn themselves 2 marshmallows just 15 minutes later. The researchers then tracked how these children did throughout the rest of their lives in different scenarios and areas. And according to the results of the study, those that were able to delay gratification had several advantages, including the fact that those who waited were able to perform better academically later on. They had much higher SAT scores and fewer behavioral problems. The successful late CEO of YouTube, Susan Wojcicki, was also famously in this study, and her mom recounts that, quote, she showed greater self-restraint than any other pupil. This was perhaps a signal of success in business to come later on in her life, but I think it really just illustrates to you how important delayed gratification is. The lesson here is that if you can delay gratification, you're probably going to be more successful, and far too often people just want that instant dopamine hit, and those are the same types of people with the behaviors where perhaps they might forego investing in retirement, or they might prematurely hop jobs, or perhaps they just want to go for the YOLO stock that tries to get them a 50x, but then they end up losing everything instead. That's why the $20,000 level is so psychologically important. It kind of shows you that you've built this discipline, you've built this consistency, you've gotten from $10,000 to $20,000, and perhaps you can exercise more delayed gratification. Now, if you want to get to the 20K mark as quickly as possible, here are 3 fast, actionable tips that I have for you. First, you want to know where you are in your journey. So just like if you were starting a new fitness journey or starting a new hobby, you need to figure out what your baseline is. Knowing where you are financially means that you know what your net worth is and you know roughly how much you're spending and making on a monthly basis. Now, once you know where you stand, you can take steps to growing that money. Second, we want to play good defense. That means tracking everything for at least 30 days. So in an app or a spreadsheet, you can see exactly where your money is going. And if you can track your expenses this way, most people will probably find $200 to $500 a month in leaks that they didn't realize they existed. For example, I did this exercise with a friend of mine on this YouTube channel as one of my first videos. And we found out that by analyzing his bank statements and his credit card statements that he was spending over $800 a month on Uber alone. Once we figured that out, that gave him the freedom to justify buying a different type of transportation. So whether that was an electric bike for him or perhaps a really used car, in order to bring down his Uber cost $500 to $600 a month. I think you would be surprised at how much you are spending through consistent small purchases, and sometimes it really adds up to more than what you might think. The third tip I have for you is, well, play good offense. I mean, so that could look like asking for a raise if you haven't gotten one in a while. So if you've been performing really well, then perhaps a 5 to 10% raise is in order. That could add quite a bit of buffer and allow you to save more money to hit that 20K as quickly as possible. Of course, you want to make sure you research the salary data for your role first before you do this and make sure it's quite reasonable. You could also take on a side hustle or sell stuff that you don't use. The idea is that every dollar matters a lot more on your way to $20,000. So anything that you can scrounge up will help. I hope that this video helped, and if you are able to hit that $20,000 mark, I do think life gets a lot better than just at the $10,000 level. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've noticed these same shifts. Now, if you're interested in my previous video on why the first 10K changes things, I will leave it up right here so that you can watch it, and I'll see you guys in that video or a future video on the channel. Thank you for being here. Peace.